before the homily, just this brief thought. One of the things that came out of the pandemic that I'm grateful for is that by recording homilies and masses, I get to be connected with people I love across the miles. People from various parishes at which I served, or friends, or it turns out people all around the country. And I am such a blessed man. It makes me happy that I can offer this in hopes that God might speak some message for you through me and in spite of me. And so I'm really glad that you're here. And I would imagine this day that there are plenty of people for whom life is hard right now. If that's you, know that every time I go to Mass, I keep you in my heart. Even if I don't know you're suffering, or if I do, I hold you before God, and I am truly glad that we're in it together. So, here's the homily. My friends sometimes make fun of me, but I usually eat kale just like this. Now, I rarely sit down to eat, and this is just more convenient and efficient. Now, I am not a big fan of how kale tastes. I eat it because kale is good for me. That's what I've been told. It's good for me. You know, it was over 20 years ago now when I started looking at nutritional values and food labels. This young priest, Father Steve Gilgum, came to Assumption Parish as the associate pastor when I was pastor there. He was a wonderful young man. He also ate healthily, and he was the one that got me looking at labels and nutritional value. Now, certainly, as you know, I'm sure, there are some things to avoid, or at least to be sure to take in moderation. In my case, I know I have to avoid garlic because it just kills my stomach. Onions, they don't kill it, they just injure it. Now, but as much as it's good to look for, ingredients and things that we need to avoid, Father Steve taught me also to ask, why is this food good for me? Not always why might that be bad, but why might this be good? Thus, kale. Kale, which is a great source of beta carotene, which has, other important carotenoids. It's quite high in vitamin A and calcium. It's good for me. So apples, which I more naturally like. Apples, got antioxidants and other anti-inflammatory properties. I'm told from reading that apples produce short-chain fatty acids, which may help prevent certain cancers or help with some other gastrointestinal stuff. Now, plenty of you are much better at all of this than I am, but I do know that it's a good question to ask. Why is this good for me? On this feast of the body and blood of Christ, we do well to ask that same question. Why is it good for us? Now, there are so many ways we could look at that. I'm going to only focus on 3 now. 3 ways that the Eucharist is good for us. Number 1, the Eucharist is good for you. It's good for me first because it just brings us together. The gathering itself is important. It takes us into a community bigger than our own family and inner circle. And it's good to be around other people who are just trying to be good human beings. That alone is a blessing. It's good to have people who will, when we're excited, celebrate with us. When we're heartbroken, who will cry with us, who will comfort us. Who, when we're terrified, will stand with us. And it's good that we're different, actually. It was the author James Joyce who once said in describing the Catholic Church, here comes everybody. And that's it. I mean, when you gather, I would say, look around. I mean, I always say, there's even 4 or 5 nice people here. Anyway, but I do believe it makes our souls bigger to gather into a bigger community like that. It just does. With people that are similar, maybe not so similar. Even if we didn't name it as such, this gives us a sense of our common humanity. Takes us a little bit outside of our own little immediate concerns of all the time and reminds us that we are really in it together. It's just a truly important thing. So the first reason I mean, why is the Eucharist good for us? It gathers us into community. Number 2, it's good for us because when we gather for Mass, Christ is there. I mean, it seems almost unnecessary to say, but it's good to remember Christ is there. He promised he would be there. And when we bless the bread and the wine and it becomes his body, but he said, this is my body, this is my blood. I just choose to take him on his word for that, right? And when we take in then that bread blessed, that wine blessed, we are taking into ourselves the one who is all the love in the universe. I was a baby priest many years ago when I was doing a little video series I wrote on the Eucharist, a little 10-part study guide. And I interviewed this one sweet old farmer, Wally. And I said, Wally, anything else you want to add? And I laughed. Wally goes, about the Mass, he goes, well, I just think of what my mom used to tell us. Eat it, it's good for you. I'd say he's right. Christ is present in bread and wine, in the word that's proclaimed and broken, and in the gathering itself. Being with him, it's good for us. And number 3, it's good to begin each week with the Mass because it's also about remembering who we are and why we are. We get so busy and caught up in the details of our lives and all the tasks, and we can forget the big picture. And the Mass helps us remember that we're not alone and that our lives are not all about us. And, we step back a bit from the normal pace and we're changed by what stirs in us through that scripture passage or the music or the gathering. And it really does help us remember what does matter to us, what we say matters to us, but we sometimes forget. And why are we on earth, right? And when suffering visits us, because it visits us all, the Mass reminds us that God is in it with us. And when the suffering is that suffering that comes from love, the freely chosen suffering of love, we remember that Christ offering himself here is how he always loved us, even to his death on the cross. That Christ understands our heartaches and our letting goes, and that he's with us and weeping with us in our heartache, and always trying to work good from that for us. This kind of remembering is good for us. So those are just 3 of the reasons. I do think you and I are often unaware of this, but we each have a place in our souls, unnamed, where we are hungry and thirsty for the Mass. I think of some early Christians who were persecuted and maybe would even be killed for gathering to celebrate the Mass, who said, we could not live without the Eucharist. They knew they needed it. There's something so important, so humbly beautiful and life-giving. What happens at Mass nurtures the best and most noble parts of who we are. it really, it deepens our capacity for meaning, for joy-filled lives, ultimately. And if I miss Sunday Mass, I miss all of that. Yep, plenty of reasons not to go, but if I take a second and think about it, I do need that to begin my week. It's so good for me to gather with others, to meet the Christ present at Mass, and to remember again who I am, why I am, and what is the meaning in my suffering. It is good for me. Several weeks ago at our All Things New meeting where all the priests were gathered, I ran into Father Steve Gilgim again, and I thanked him for how good he was to be with and for the blessing he was to the parish and to me personally. And I didn't think of this in the moment, but when I think about it now, one of the ways he blessed me was that he was the one who taught me to look at a label or a piece of food and say, why is this good for me? That's our question today. Why is the Mass good for us? Why is the Mass good for you?